Hey guys, Mr. Gibson here. We are going to talk about resource allocation and economic systems. Okay. A few quick notes here on learning objective. Uh, we're going to talk about how different economic systems determine how resources are allocated. Uh, the essential knowledge part, we'll talk about the three types of economic systems. And we'll also talk about what these basic questions that are answered with these economic systems. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into it real quick. Okay. The basic question here is, what does society do with its scarce resources? How do they extract their resources, use their resources, and then distribute their resources? That's what we mean by resource allocation. Okay. And we're going to talk about different economic systems that aim to answer these problems. Okay. So let's go into the basic problems that societies face when it comes to their resources. The first question is, what goods and services to produce? Okay. So basically, what does society value? Okay. So what what does society value enough to take its scarce resources and change it into that good and service? Okay. So first we got to determine that. So the what. Then we have to determine the how to produce those goods and services. Okay. So how do societies utilize their resources in production? Okay. So, how do they produce this? Okay, then finally, once they produce something, how do societies, who consumes these goods and services? Who gets the merits of the production? Okay, so it's a what, how, and who. Okay, so what to produce, what do they value, how to produce it, um, how is it utilized? What do they do? How do they get their resources to be utilized in a certain way in production? And then finally, who gets to consume this? Who gets the merit? Who gets the end goal of this production? Okay. So there's two basic economic systems. Okay. There's what we call the market economy, um, and this is based on private ownership. Okay. Uh, Private owners of resources of get to determine how these resources are produced, what are produced, and who consumes it. Okay. It's based on prices. Okay. This is very uh, hands off, called laissez faire often, which is French for hands off. Uh, it is up to individuals, it's individualistic. It, sometimes we call it capitalist, we call it libertarianism. Okay. Many Western democracies hold a lot of these market economy principles. But yes, it's based on competition. It's unrestricted. Okay. The only thing that has to be held up is this idea of private ownership, and it works. Okay. Versus on the other end of the spectrum is a command economy, and everything that's produced is determined by the government. Okay, or by what we call often a central planner. We call these socialist, communist. Sometimes sometimes it's dictatorships, authoritarian governments, anarchist, but it's based on a system of collective ownership. Not individuals don't own anything, but the collective state owns everything. Okay, and they get to determine what is produced, how it's produced, and who gets to consume it. Okay. Here's some graphics on the market economy versus the command economy. Uh, you can see with this graphic for command economy, you got a central planner, the government. They plan the economy, and it doesn't have to be a communist country. Uh, there's a lot of smaller, young democracies in the 1950s that used this form of economy. They would have 5 year plans, and within that 5 year plans, they would determine how much they're going to produce and who's going to consume it. And then they would go kind of backward design it and figure out what on to step two of like figuring out how to get the resources and how to allocate them. They would get their businesses, their firms to produce these goods and services. They would get uh, they would set the priorities with it, as it says. They would, determine how much labor they need and what uh, they build whole cities based on the productions of certain goods. And then finally, they would get to determine who would get to consume these goods, how much of whatever goods were produced, how much would folks get with that. Market economy, again, this is all with the command economy going backward. It's all based on public ownership. It's collectively owned. There's not a single person owning something. This is based on but market economy. It's based on private ownership. Uh, you have the freedom to choose what you produce and how you produce it, and you get some choice with it. It's based on competition. Okay, everything's based on prices. All right. Um, but anyway, and it says limited government because the government's really not involved in production of the economy. It's really only there to uphold this idea of private ownership and, of course, just basic laws in the judicial system. Okay, that would be the a very an extreme form of a market economy. Everything else is determined by the market. Okay, few notes here. Okay, because with younger folks, you guys get kind of carried away with market economy and capitalism versus a command economy and socialism, and what's the merits of the pros and cons of each, and which economy we should probably slide more towards or less towards. And I want to make clear at the beginning of this subject that we're going to stay in this realm of what's called positive economics. And positive economics is just talking about what the economy is. Okay. Normative economics is a study of like what should be done. Okay. And it's actually a little less interesting because oftentimes that's more based on your beliefs than anything else. Frankly, we're going to talk mostly more of a market economy based stuff, and then we kind of will trickle in a few things about a command economy and what government can do, and what government can't do, and what government messes up. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through the subject. I mean, sometimes often people think economics is some study of like uh, not even a study, but just a indoctrination into a ideas about the market-based economy, and that's generally not true. It will talk about what how a market economy works and how markets work and how businesses work, but it's not a whole scale um, indoctrination toward a market economy. I hope at the end of it, you'll see where a market economy can be more efficient. We can also see how it can be sometimes be a little less fair. Okay. Anyway, uh, the first thing to note too about this debate between having a command economy versus a market economy is that no system in the world is is truly one or the other. Okay. The closest examples to anything being purely one of these is probably North Korea or Cuba. They're as close to a command economy as possible. Okay. Everything else sits somewhere on a spectrum. Okay. Even China, it used to be a command economy, but they saw the merits of having some market principles within their economy. And so they're more of a mixed economy and probably a little closer to this command side. Okay. And a mixed economy means that you have a mixture of command elements versus market elements. Uh, Often people try to say that Nordic countries like Sweden or Norway um, tend to be, quote, socialist economies. And that's not entirely true. Um, they're very much a mixed economy. They have uh, a lot of market economy type characteristics, but they do have a large social safety net, which means that there are elements to their economy that is controlled by the government. Okay. And, but guess what? That's true of the United States. We tend to see the United States tends to sit farther closer to a pure market economy, but we're still a mixed economy. There are plenty of characteristics or industries within our economy that are planned, that are that fit under this command economy uh, definition. Okay, so I like to go back to the what, how, and who, and hopefully this will make you guys see the command versus the market economy a little more clearly. So the what is valued, what is produced, how what is allocated. In a command economy, central planners versus a market economy, private owners. Uh, the command side of our economy, government run stuff. Best example is education. Who plans how people are educated, or what resources are allocated towards education in our economy is a government is the government, is the Metro Nashville schools. Okay, they plan it. Versus private owners, well, they get to figure out other stuff like how to make pizza, or what, we value pizza, and they go and they use their entrepreneurship, they use their stores, they use their space, their land, their capital. They buy ovens to make pizza. Okay, how are uh, resources utilized? How are they produced? Uh, in a command economy, government monopolies. Okay, you can think of education again. It's produced through the actual metropolitan national public schools. That's a government monopoly over that. I know it doesn't fit perfectly because there are private school options in this country. Get in the weeds about that, but it's the Metro National Public Schools that get to determine how you are educated, what materials are used, who the teachers are, all that good stuff. It's from a central planner. How many kids go to Hillwood versus Hillsboro versus um, some other school is determined by the metro school government. Okay, market economy, it's determined by firms. The privately owned businesses, we call those firms. They produce goods and services, and they can be in stiff competition with each other. If you are a pizza maker, there's other pizza makers around the city, and you might be in competition. You might try to find a better location. You might compete on prices, but you're in competition with each other. Okay, and no one is forced to come to your firm, so um, you have to find ways to be competitive and to get an edge. And then finally, the who. Determined in a command economy, it's determined by government regulation and law. Just again, in the education example here, government regulation, they create the zoning laws and determine who goes to which schools. There's a little more school choice now, but that it's largely not up to you. You can't just up and decide to go to a school in Clarksville. You have to go to the schools within Nashville, and usually the school within your zone. Okay, and that's determined by government fiat, by government law. Okay, and then in a market economy, who determines who gets a piece of pizza is whoever's willing to pay for it. It's determined by prices. If the price is too high and you don't want it, you won't get it. If the price is right, you will go and you'll purchase a slice of pizza. Okay. Now, again, with the mixed economy, uh, you're going to be somewhere on the spectrum. Or do you have more aspects of your economy that are market? Like here in the United States, we have a lot of markets. Okay. A lot of things that are determined by prices. Versus command economy, you can think of somewhere like North Korea. Most of their economy is by a central planner, and everything is determined by the government. How much clothing you get, how much food you get, how much education, how much free time, whatever. How you market economy, the what versus central planners versus private owners. In a market economy, you are a private owner of your labor. In a command economy, they get to determine, hey, if we need to produce this much, we're going to make you produce that much. We are going to force you to be a laborer in our government monopoly. Versus in our economy, you're not forced to be a laborer in anybody's business. You get to determine how you want to use your skills and ply your trades and offer it to firms who will exchange uh, exchange cash with you for your resource, your labor. Okay, that's how a market economy works versus a command economy. And then what makes market economies unfair to people are prices. Some things can be priced too high for most people to ever be able to attain that or get it. And so that leaves people out of certain markets. Whereas in the command economy, it's determined by the government. It can still be unfair, but maybe it's more fair. You know, it or potentially could be more fair because it they allocate the resources in an even manner. They determine that everybody gets just one shirt or something like that. Okay, but of course we could get into the weeds about discussing the merits of each another, and we're just talking about how it is at this point. Okay, so anyway, thanks for your attention on that. Let's go back to um, our enduring understandings and learning objective. We talked about um, how resources are allocated or influenced by the economic system, command versus a market economy. Uh, we talked about how resource allocation involves the three questions of what, how, and who. And then finally, we talked about our economic systems that are adopted by certain societies. Far ends of the spectrum, we have a command economy versus a market economy, and but most economies sit somewhere in between, and we call them mixed economies. And when we're talking about these institutional arrangements and coordinating mechanisms, what we're talking about there is when it comes to a command economy, the institutional arrangement is through a central planner. The coordinating mechanism is through a central planner and through government monopolies. And the allocation is done by law and by regulation versus um, in a market economy, the institutional arrangement is private ownership and the coordinating mechanism is privately held firms and individuals making decisions and uh, choosing what they want to do. And the allocation of this of the resources and the distribution is determined through prices. Okay, so um, command economy is very centralized decision making, whereas um, the command or the market economy is completely individualized decision making. Okay, so that's a final word on how to distinguish between the two. Okay, thank you guys for your